Okay. Good morning, John. Say hi. You're live on Facebook.
Hello there.
Not front row. Steve. I said no front row.
No front row? Well, you gotta be my door mark.
Good morning. Is this not a cool place or what? You are sitting in one of the most advanced technological auditoriums in the state of Indiana, maybe in the country here at Sweetwater. So, welcome to First Fridays. My name is Jim Johnson. I'm one of the co-founders of First Fridays, along with my brother Jerry, who's probably still out there welcoming people. We started a little late because I started getting texts from our regulars saying, I'm here at the campus, there's nobody here. We normally meet on the campus of Indiana Wesleyan University over by Lutheran Hospital. So some people apparently didn't read all the massive emails we sent out, so they'll be here. But we're going to go ahead and get started. How many this is your first time to be at First Fridays? Raise your hand. All right, well, fantastic. I say First Fridays Fort Wayne because right now there's a First Fridays meeting in the Cincinnati area on the campus of Indiana Wesleyan University down there, and we're in the planning process right now of launching First Fridays Indianapolis. So we've already had a planning session there. We've got some dynamic people in there, so we're really excited. I even talked to my Romanian exchange student last night, and I said, maybe we need to do First Fridays in Romania. She's sponsored by the Kiwanis Club, and she said, I think I might be able to make that happen. So who knows? That'll be kind of cool. All right, real quick recap of some of the things coming up. Next month, because of spring break, we won't meet on the first Friday. We will meet on the second Friday, like we did last year. We have Dr. Eddie, is it Shagley? Am I saying that right? I don't know if Jerry's in here or not. He's a professor, tennis coach at Indiana Wesleyan University. He's also a leadership speaker that speaks all over the planet. So we're going to be really blessed to hear him. He's going to be a great speaker. And then in May, we have Jim Wilcox from Sandler Consulting Group here in Fort Wayne will be speaking. And then for the guys, that'll be your last one until the following September. But ladies, you have an event that Jan's going to come up at the end and talk a little bit more about on June 7th. So you want to mark your calendars. We're going to have another women's event. Instead of 1 hour, it's going to be 3 hours. It won't be here. It'll be at the Mural Center. So she'll give you a little more detail on that. Is Allie Lane here? There she is. Why don't you stand up? Or Jerry told me to tell you to stand up again. So, no. Allie is part of Mad Ants here in town, our professional basketball team. A week from tonight, it's going to be First Friday's night at the Mad Ants. If you have not purchased tickets, Addie will be out at one of the tables afterwards, and you can buy tickets. They've given us great pricing. It's going to be a fun night. If you've never been to one of the Mad Ants games, you need to go. Great entertainment, all right, for the family and all. Let me see my other notes here. And I know we've got several Sweetwater folks here, but Chuck and the team here have been very gracious to allow us to be in this place. So I want to say a special thanks to Sweetwater, and you can also express your thanks to Sweetwater by afterwards going and buying a guitar, or a piano, or I have. Or even if you do podcasting, you know they do USB mics here. I bet you didn't know that. They do a lot of stuff. Well, right now we're going to turn the mic over to somebody very special to me, and a lot of you already know who she is. We're going to learn a little bit more about the Champions of Change Awards. So coming up on the platform right now is the Vice President of Community and Corporate Impact at Greater Fort Wayne, Inc. And she was our inaugural speaker at last year's women's event that was held right here at Sweetwater. Let's welcome Brenda Gerber-Vincent.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Jerry, and thank you, Jan, for this amazing event that's been going on now several years. I said to Jan just a few minutes ago, it's amazing the platform that you've created in our community. So thank you. But as Jim said, my name is Brenda Gerber-Vincent. I am the Vice President of Greater Fort Wayne Community and Corporate Impact. I'm the newest member of that team, and I can tell you that it's a very exciting time in our community to be holding that baton. I think you will agree that the momentum and energy and excitement in our community is just, it's an exciting time. So thank you for listening to this new event that's called Champions of Change. And if you were familiar with the Athena Award, this award actually replaces that. So The Champions of Change Award is going to honor two extraordinary leaders in our community, one male and one female, who demonstrate unwavering passion and commitment in our community, are role models making a difference in the lives of others, have made significant contributions that have inspired women to succeed, have made Greater Fort Wayne a better place to live, work, and play. And I'm challenging all of you right now. The deadline for nominations is this Monday, the 4th. So I'm challenging all of you to nominate either yourself or someone that you know. In this time of men getting a bad rap, there are so many men in our community that are breaking down barriers for women's success. And we want to celebrate those men in our community, as well as the women in our community that are breaking down barriers for women's success and mentoring and making them better and coming alongside of them to help mentor and counsel them to have greater opportunities for success in business in our community. So I challenge you to go home, make that recommendation. You can go to the Greater Fort Wayne website to be able to do that. I want to point out two other events that we have coming up on June 7th. We will be partnering with First Fridays for their female event. So we're really excited about doing that. Thank you, Jim and Jerry and Jan. And then on October 18th, we have the LeaderCast Women's 2019 Live that will be held at the summit. So more details about that we'll be able to share at the women's event in June. I also want to recognize, when we talk about lifting other people up and other women, I want to recognize Jamie Thomas. Jamie's here. If you'll stand up, Jamie. Jamie is the Director of Investor Relations. I would say the majority of people know Jamie. We've been together now for 4 weeks, and she's an amazing leader. But she's the Director of Investor Relations and Programs. Jamie is responsible for the retention of investors through relationship building and regular communication. As a former business owner herself and facilitator, Jamie brings her passion of business and customer service. So these programs that I'm talking about, the Champions and Change, and the partnering with First Fridays and the LeaderCast, these are all under Jamie's responsibility, and she just does a fantastic job. So if you have any questions, please get a hold of Jamie. But in the meantime, please nominate somebody that you know in our community that's really helping women to succeed. And be sure to attend the lunch on April 24th. So thank you. Heather, I can't wait to hear you speak. So we're all looking forward to it. So thank you.
I went to the LeaderCast event last year with Barry Schrock, and it was well worth going. It's a women's event, but Jamie allowed us in there, and we didn't have to dress like that TV show Bosom Buddies. Although Barry called the Tom Hanks, that's who you wanted to be that morning. We didn't have to do that, so it was an excellent, excellent event, so I would encourage you to do that. All right, now for why we're actually here. We've been very blessed. I was telling Heather this morning, it was about a year ago. It was down in Westfield, Indiana, at a dance competition. My son and I always sit in the nosebleed seats for the Homestead dance competitions, and I was looking down and I saw my wife sitting next to somebody, so I texted her and I said, are you sitting next to Heather Herron? She goes, well, yeah. The Heather Herron, yes. So I said, she goes, who do you think I've been talking about at home? Well, she just said Heather. Heather is one of the main dance moms at the Homestead High School thing. So I texted her, I said, ask her if she'll do First Fridays. I asked her to do that, and I pestered her until she did. And today it's happening. I'm excited about that. If you didn't know some things about Heather, let me share some things. Heather spent 17 years as the evening anchor of Wayne TV. You saw her not only do that, but interview a lot of newsmakers, just one of the best interviewers I've ever seen. Her broadcast career began back in 1990. She actually grew up in Gaston, Indiana, is that right? You get extra credit if you know where that's at. She's worked in radio, TV stations in Indiana and Michigan. She's been a reporter, a producer, and then of course the news anchor. And it's just been about a year that she's been here at Sweetwater. That's been a fast year. She's got a bachelor's degree in telecommunications from Ball State. As a journalist, she's won a lot of awards, including a regional Emmy. She's very active in our community. She works with the local chapter of the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation, the Girl Scouts. She's been past board president of Family and Children's Services, which is now called Headwaters Counseling. She's the president of the Parents Club School, and as I can attest to, she's an outstanding dance mom at Homestead High School. We'll give a little prop to our girls. They went to nationals last weekend in Orlando, and they placed second in jazz dance. It was very very tough competition. They did fantastic. But Heather does a great job with those. On a personal note, Heather is married to Jim. As I said, he'll be our May speaker. And you may call him Mr. Heather Herron. Easier for that. They've got 2 great daughters. One's in college and one's at Homestead. So enough of me talking. Let's give a very warm First Friday Fort Wayne welcome to Heather Herron.
Thank you, Jim, and thank you all for being here. I was thinking this morning just how cool it is that so many of you for so many years invited me into your homes via the television at 5, 6, and 11. And so today it's really neat that I get to invite you into my new home here at Sweetwater. As Jim mentioned, it's coming up close to a year now since I first started talking with the folks at Sweetwater and agreed to make the jump to come over here, and it has been nothing but amazing. This is a fabulous company, as I think most of you know. Chuck is an amazing, very generous community philanthropist, an amazing business owner, entrepreneur, so it has been a terrific experience. I have a fancy title here, it doesn't mean much, but I'm Vice President of Corporate Communications. It means that I take care of internal and external PR, and I also head up our philanthropy, so all of the charitable giving that we do, I'm a facilitator of that, as well as a few other internal projects that we're working on. So again, it's super exciting to be here. As Jim mentioned, I have been talking professionally since I was about 16 years old, actually. That was when I first got my job in radio, and I worked in radio all through college, and then transitioned over into television my senior year of college. Did an internship here in Fort Wayne, and then got hired out of that internship. Worked at Channel 33, which was WKJG at the time, now Wise TV, in Fort Wayne. For about a year, moved to Grand Rapids, Michigan, and I was an anchor there for about 7 years. That's where I met my husband. We had 2 kids, and then had the opportunity to move back to Fort Wayne, and so this is home, and it's awesome. So again, thank you for being here. Most of you speak for a living to some degree. I know you're all professionals, and so when I was thinking about the things that I wanted to speak to you about today, most of this is common sense, but these are things, some takeaways that I have learned over the years that I think if we all are a little more conscious about the way that we're communicating every day, that will help us grow professionally and even personally. It's important to communicate well because that's how we all interact with each other. Whether it's spoken word, whether it's nonverbal, whether it's the written word, it is essential in business and just in your personal life that you're able to communicate well. If you do it well, you're going to be memorable. And if you do it poorly, you're going to be memorable. Not for the right reason, but you will be. And so I'm thinking back at some of the lessons that I've learned over the years and the many failures that I've had that have grown to make me better. And one of the first examples I can think of, I did my internship at Channel 33, and right as I was graduating, there was a job opening. And I had been a reporter, and they said, we have a part-time reporter, part-time weather person opening. Can you do the weather? Yeah, sure. I can do, no, I can't do the weather. But I said, yes, I would do it. I have no science background, and they said, that's okay, we'll teach you some of that stuff. We just need someone to present the weather. Back then, this was 25 years ago, it wasn't as important to have a meteorological degree. You just need to be able to talk. And so I said, sure, I can learn. My very first weekend on the air, and how many of you are from Fort Wayne originally? Do you remember when Channel 33 used to have the weather deck? So we did the tease segment inside, and then during the commercial break, the weather person actually walked outside and did the weather outside. It was just one of those kind of, gimmicks that was very popular back then. So we do that, and I'm so excited, and it's my first time doing weather on the air, and I walk outside, and I'm standing there waiting, and we're in a commercial break, and I can hear it in my earpiece that we're in a commercial break. But I'm looking at the monitors, and there are 3 monitors, and I'm looking at them, and they're black. There's nothing in them. And I think, oh, well, I'm sure as soon as we come out of a commercial break, the monitors are going to turn on, right? And so you know how weather technology works. There's a green screen. monitors so that you know what you're pointing at. You have to. You know what happens. You come out of the commercial break, the monitors are black. So I'm completely blind. I cannot see the weather map. I can't see what I'm pointing at. I can't see anything. I can't see myself. I can hear myself, but I can't see anything. And I have this moment of panic, and I think, okay, I can do this, and so I don't quite frankly remember what I did, but I must have pointed at something, and I did the forecast, and I got done as quickly as I could. And we get to the end of the newscast, and we say goodnight, and I take a deep breath, and I go back into the newsroom, and about 10 minutes later the phone rings, and it's my news director. And she says, "Hey, have you had a chance to watch it back yet?" And I said, "No." And she said, "Can you do me a favor?" I said, "Sure." She said, "Don't." She said, "I'm afraid if you watch it back, I will never get you to do weather again." So I didn't watch it back. And 2 lessons came from that. The first is, thank goodness the internet didn't exist then. Because as you know, every mistake that you make now is recorded and lives on in infamy. The internet was just in its infancy then. So there is no record of it, there is no tape that I know of. It does not exist. So I'm incredibly thankful for that. But more importantly, the bigger lesson I learned is that 2 things. You can admit to someone, to your audience, to the viewers, that you need help. What I should have done in hindsight, and I was 22 years old and didn't know any better, what I should have said was, "Hey, guys in the control room, can you turn the monitors on for me?" It would have been as simple as that. And the audience would have thought, "Oh, okay, well, they're having some technical issue and it's not a big deal," and they would have fixed it and it would have gone on and it would have been successful, or at least much more successful than it was. So I learned it's okay to show a little bit of that vulnerability and to ask for help. People actually like to see that. People like to see that you're human and that mistakes happen and you fix them and you move on. The second lesson I learned, and this was just by doing weather then, and I did go back and I did it for about 4 months, was that you learn doing weather to speak off the cuff. Nothing you see when you see the meteorologists on TV is scripted. It's all ad-lib, based on what maps they've produced. And so as I got better at it over the next 4 months, it really was a great lesson for me as a reporter then, because I learned how to become knowledgeable, to learn your subject matter, to practice, and then be able to be successful at what you're doing. And it was a great lesson for me. I didn't aspire at any means to do weather for any longer than that 4 months that I did. Luckily, an anchor job opened up and they shifted me over to being an anchor. So just keep that in mind, that it's okay to show your vulnerability and then make sure that whatever it is, the mistake that happened, that you're learning from it and that you are getting better every time. That makes a great communicator. All of the instances that you think about the interactions that you have every single day. So many of you give presentations professionally. You speak at a board meeting. You may have a one-on-one interaction with a colleague or a boss. So some of these tips that I want to talk about really apply to all of those. And the first one is when you're speaking or when you're interacting with someone, do it with confidence. And I know that might sound easier said than done. Sometimes being confident is simply faking it. You know, you've heard the phrase, fake it till you make it. And sometimes that's true. Sometimes it's okay to do that. Of course you want to be knowledgeable, you want to be prepared, but it's okay to project a feeling that you might not actually be feeling. Because once you get past the nerves, once you get past the anxiety or the fear that you have of that first interaction and you settle in, you're going to be just fine. It doesn't matter who you're communicating with or what the setting is, but it is really important to be authentic. And I know that you all have seen and heard broadcasters or bosses or people who are not, they're just not authentic, and you can see through that. I worked with an anchor probably 20 years ago, and she was a very good storyteller, but what I started to notice about her when I watched her was that she would read a sentence, something from a script, and at the end of it, she would go, and it was this very forced. So in her head, I'm thinking, she's probably thinking, now I'm reading and I'm telling you a story, and when I get done, I probably need to smile to tell you that I'm happy to be here. and it was very, very forced, and it made me uncomfortable to watch her. And she was a very nice person, but her delivery and the way she approached the communication that she was giving was not in any way authentic. Her true personality didn't show through that, and it seemed very forced. And my guess is that the viewers at home also picked up on that. So that's something that you need to keep in mind when you're talking with even just a friend. Be who you are. Be authentic, because people can see through that, and they're going to admire you more, even if your authenticity is a little bit flawed, even if you're not perfect. I had the pleasure, so growing up, by the way, I wanted to be a broadcaster since I was about 12 years old. And Jane Pauley was my idol. And I say that, I spoke to some kids at a high school class not long ago at Carroll, and we were talking about who's your role model, and I said, Jane Pauley. And they all just, I said, you don't know who Jane Pauley is? Like, how can you not, and she's back, she's on Sunday, CBS Sunday Morning now. No one knew who she was, but growing up, Jane Pauley was the ultimate broadcaster to me. It didn't hurt that she was from Indiana. I thought that was kind of a cool thing. And I even wrote a poem about her in my senior notebook. And the title of the poem, and I'm not making this up, was called Oh, to Be Like Her. So I wrote this poem, and I had it in my senior book. And about 5 years ago, we got word that Jane Pauley was coming to Fort Wayne. She was going to be the keynote for Tapestry. So right away, I said to my boss, if we can get this interview, I'm doing it. I'm all over that. So we secured the interview, and I was going to get to go meet Jane Pauley. And I can't even tell you how excited I was to get to go do that. But in the back of my mind, I kept thinking, what if she's not the person that I have made her out to be in my head? I had put her on this pedestal. And I was so nervous about meeting her just because it was Jane Pauley, but because also I thought, what if I'm let down? You have a role model or you have a mentor, and you think that they're one thing, and you hope that they are exactly as they appear to be. I got to spend maybe 6 minutes with her, and she was everything that I hoped she would be. So authentic, so kind. I had a little fangirl moment, and I pulled out my notebook from my senior year. And I said, I wrote this poem about you. And now I'm doing what you're doing. And I was so excited. And I said, would you indulge me? Would you sign this? And so she signed my notebook. This really cool thing. And I got lots of pictures with her that I have all framed now. And she said, could you email me a copy of this poem? And I said, oh, I'll do you one better. I have a copy for you. I was so prepared. So I gave her the copy. And, she posed for some pictures, and she was so kind and generous. And then later I thought, I'm such an idiot. I could have gotten her email address. Right? But I didn't. I was excited just to hand her the copy. So my point in telling you that story is that she was as authentic in person as I had hoped she would be after all of those years of watching her. And that came through. That was one of the reasons that I really admired her. That was one of the reasons that I looked up to her. Not just because she was smart and a great interviewer and just a wonderful broadcaster, but because I really felt like she's a nice person. And she is. And so that's something that I still to this day try to keep in mind. I was at dinner not long ago with a girlfriend, and at the end of the dinner, the waiter came up and said, I just wanted to tell you, I love watching you on television. And first of all, I thought, well, I haven't been on TV in like 9 months, but that's okay. I didn't correct him. And I said, thank you, I really appreciate that. And he said, I've been watching you all night long, and I just think you're just really this cool person. And it made me stop and think, again, about the way we present ourselves in public, and that authenticity comes through. And all I had been doing was sitting and chatting with a friend and having dinner and enjoying the evening, not really thinking watching me, but someone is always watching, someone is always paying attention, and they're watching your nonverbals, and they're, paying attention to what you're doing. That comes through. So it's a little fishbowl-ish. That was the term I used to use when I was on television, because I would be in public, and I could sense that people were watching, or I would hear somebody say, "Oh, that's the lady on TV," and I'd smile, and they'd be embarrassed because I heard them. And so, and it was a little bit like living in a fishbowl, but being authentic and being who you are and being true to yourself when you're in front of people and when you're not necessarily in front of people is really key to communicating. One of the things that I think great communicators do is shut up. They don't talk. And I'm sure you've all heard that before. The best communicators are also the best listeners. And that is very key to building successful relationships with people. When I was a reporter, people would often ask ahead of time, they would say, "Hey, we'll do the interview with you, but will you give us a list of questions?" And first of all, most journalists don't like to give a list of questions ahead of time. It's just kind of not what you do. And I would tell them, I'm happy to give you some ideas. I'm happy to give you some talking points, some things that I'm going to be asking you about, but I'm not going to give you the list of questions. And here's the reason why. I want to be able to change my questions, because if you're doing a good interview, it's because you're listening. Bad interviewers simply are just rattling off a list of questions, and so they're waiting for you to stop talking, and they go to the next question, and then you stop talking, and they go to the next question. The best interviewers, the best conversationalists, the best bosses, the best colleagues are people who stop talking, and they actually listen, and they respond to that. So if I'm doing an interview with someone, I'm going to follow up on what they just said. I'm not going to just wait for them to stop talking. Listen to what they have to say, and then base your next question or your next comment or your next, part of the conversation on what they've just said. So when we think of communicating, most of us think about talking, and we all like to talk. Who doesn't like to talk? But the best communicators also listen really, really well, and that's something that took me a while to learn. Another trick that I learned early on, and that I actually fall victim to now, which is very interesting, is letting that moment of silence happen. Most of us are really afraid of quiet. And so you're having a conversation with someone, and they stop talking, and right away you feel like you need to jump in. Don't do that. Just let it breathe a minute. And you know why? They will fill that space for you. And it's a great way to get to know somebody. It's a great way to get to build a relationship with someone or learn more about them, because they will fill that space for you. I tell you, I fall victim to it because I have some new relationships here at Sweetwater, people that I'm meeting for the first time, people I report to, people who report to me, and so these new relationships I'm trying to build, I know someone here who does that very well. And we'll be having a conversation, and he'll stop talking, and instantly I feel this need to jump in and talk. I'm not talking about anything important, but I'm filling that space. That's okay, actually, to do that, but those are tricks that good communicators use so that you're building rapport and you are you're learning more about each other. So that's something to think about. Don't just feel like you need to talk all the time, because you don't. A good communicator also listens really well. I have a really good friend of my husband's who now I've gotten to know, and he is phenomenal at this. And it took me a while to understand what it was that I really enjoyed about being around him, and that is because when you're talking to him, he is not distracted by anything else. He is laser focused on what you're saying, and he is listening intently. And he's not listening in the terms of, I'm going to respond. He's listening because he wants to learn. He wants to know about you. And that makes him just a great communicator. I love conversations with him because he asks good questions, but then he listens. And those kinds of relationships, those kinds of people who communicate that way are essential. The other thing that I know most of us know about, but maybe are not second nature, are some of those nonverbals that we do. You're not supposed to sit in a meeting with your arms crossed or lean back. you're supposed to make eye contact. You're supposed to stand tall, don't slouch, all those kinds of things. It wasn't until I actually started preparing for this talk that I realized how ingrained some of those things are in me. And that's because I was talking with my husband, saying, you know, Jim wants me to talk about how to communicate like a pro, and I'm not really sure that I'm a pro, so how do I do this? And as we were talking back and forth, he said to me, do you realize every time you start to talk or make a point that you're very emphatic about, you sit up. You're leaning in. And I didn't realize that I did that. I also talk with my hands a lot. And so he said, do you also realize you talk with your hands a lot? But that's something that I think we all can be a little more mindful of when we're in conversations. You know, if you're in a relaxed setting, it's easy just to kind of sit back in your chair or to be comfortable, or even just to, you know, fold your arms, or, you know, look away, or be taking notes and not making eye contact. But some of those little nonverbal things that you do can make a huge difference in the way you communicate. And so just be mindful of some of those gestures, maybe that you don't realize that you have, and sit up higher, lean in a little bit. I think this is especially true for women, and I would like to think that we're at a point where it doesn't matter whether you're a man or a woman, but I unfortunately still think it does in many professional settings. And so I notice that when I'm in a meeting, and it's primarily men, and I'm the only woman in there, that I do several things to build my own confidence, but also to get their attention and hope that they believe that I'm credible. And that is leaning in when I'm talking, sitting up, making direct eye contact, and not being the first person to look away. That's very important. For women, it's also very important to watch our tone and upspeak. Do you know what I'm referring to when I say upspeak? We have been working with an outside agency recently, and we did a video conference with this group, and 4 of the 5 of them were women, very educated, professional, very intelligent women. But one of them, who is in her late 20s, had a very bad habit of doing that upspeak, kind of that college girl talk, where everything she said made it sound like it was a question. Everything she said made it sound like, I'm not sure I believe myself, I'm not sure I'm confident in what I'm saying, and she also had a very high-pitched voice. And we get to the end of the meeting, and we end the video conference, and one of my colleagues says, I don't have a lot of confidence in her. I think she's very smart, and I think she knows what she's doing, but she did not project that. And so I think that's especially important. It's important for everybody, but it's especially important for women that we get heard. And so keep some of those things in mind. Watch the pitch of your voice, watch the tone, make sure that you're not sabotaging yourself by the upspeak and by sounding that you're younger than what you really are. That's something, so I have a daughter in college, and she recently applied to be in she's a microbiology pre-med major, and she wanted to be in this pre-medical fraternity, and it was going to be a great networking opportunity, but it was a very long interview process for her, and so she called home and was asking, okay, I'm really nervous about this, and I'm not sure what they're going to ask, and how do I do this? And so I was giving her some pointers, and all of those things that I just mentioned were things that I said to her. Make sure that you're watching the pitch of your voice, that you don't sound like this overexcited co-ed. Make sure that you are looking somebody in the eye, that when you shake their hand, that you're doing it deliberately, that you have confidence. And sure enough, she got invited to be in the fraternity, and has gone on to be pretty successful over the last few months in making some of those connections and networking, because she exudes confidence. And what's funny about that is she's 19, she's 4'10" and a half. She's this tiny little thing, and she looks like she's 14. And every adult who meets her is impressed by the way she looks at you in the eye, shakes your hand, and speaks with confidence. Everybody says she's spunky. She's so, she's not afraid. And she is. That's the thing, she is. But she doesn't want anybody to see it. She just exudes confidence. And that's something that we've really worked hard to help instill in her. So I worked with a woman in Grand Rapids, Michigan. I was the weekend anchor there, and the main anchor there was a legend. She had been on TV there for 20-some years, very well known in the community, very involved, and you said her name, everybody knew who she was. And I attended several events with her, and I started watching her and just kind of taking mental notes about the way she commanded a room. And she was really larger than life. And what I noticed were little things that she did when she walked into a room. And that was things that we all know, but maybe forget, or maybe are just not top of mind. And that is when she would walk into a room, her shoulders were always back. She was very tall, by the way, so that was an advantage for her. But she exuded confidence and really commanded a room. She knew people's names. She always looked them in the eye. She always had a smile on her face, and it was authentic. It wasn't a fake smile. And so those were things that I started to kind of mimic, even when I was intimidated, even when I walked into a room of people that I didn't know, a room of people who were all experts, and I wasn't. I faked it and did some of those tricks that I watched her do, and it made a huge difference because people would say to me, "Oh, you seem like you know what you're talking about." You know, I really don't, but I'm pretending that I do. And so, you know, that sort of faking it served me well. The last thing that I wanted to talk about, and this just occurred to me last night actually as I was texting with my younger daughter who is a senior, and she was texting me in no capitalization, no punctuation, as they do, right? You guys have teenagers, right? And they don't follow any rules, and it's just maddening to me. And so I said to her, put a period in there somewhere, you know, a comma, would it kill you? I know that she knows how to do that when she writes a paper for school. I know that she knows how to do that when she's communicating with an adult. But I would argue that you need to be doing those kinds of things all the time. It really, really makes a difference. So when I first started in broadcasting, again, the internet barely existed, and we would read off of a teleprompter, and some stations did closed captioning, but not all. And so what I'm saying is, nobody saw the words that we were reading. So punctuation didn't matter, spelling didn't really matter because we were reading them and it didn't make a difference. Well, then we started doing internet stories, and so the web started becoming more popular, and we had to actually type our stories that someone would read later on. And I would notice that some of the younger reporters, their scripts, their text was filled with grammatical mistakes, filled with spelling errors. And they would say, well, it doesn't really matter because we're talking. No, it does. It does really matter. And so when you're sending an email to someone, and it's on a professional level, one of the things that you need to make sure you do is check your spelling, check your grammar, check your punctuation, because it is a huge reflection on the way you communicate. My brother-in-law came to me a couple of years ago. He was in a new job, he's in sales, and he had been pulled aside by his boss and said, I think you're a really great sales guy, but your emails are atrocious. Your spelling is horrible. The grammar is, and he said, you have to figure out how to work on this. And so for several months, when he would write a proposal or build an email, he would send it to me and say, hey, could you take a look at this for a little bit? Because he knew that by having some of those mistakes, it was really chipping away at his credibility and reflected poorly on him. And so it was something that he really made a conscious effort to work on and started to get better at it and became a little more successful in that regard. So keep in mind when you're communicating that written communication also makes a huge impact. All of those things together, the nonverbals, the confidence, the authenticity, and the written communication create a whole package that just make you a better communicator. So I would like to open it to questions and welcome any questions that you have about communicating, broadcasting, my role here at Sweetwater. Yeah, oh, go ahead.
As a professional, will you engage the media to promote your organization or to potentially get some additional information? how do you as a professional like to see approach from us? Do you-
So like if you're a nonprofit or if you're an agency wanting to get coverage for?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great question. The best thing that you can do is work on building relationships with reporters in the media. Initially, the best way to do that probably is through email. Introduce yourself, say, you know, I'm so-and-so, and we're hoping to get some publicity, we're hoping to get some coverage, that kind of thing. Now, are you asking when you're actually making a pitch or a presentation?
I was thinking both, because over the years at different organizations, I've done that, but it seems that the contacts change and
They
their
do.
directions change. And so not all of those relationships live the duration of what I need them for.
Right. And that's the nature of Fort Wayne media, unfortunately, because there's quite a bit of turnover. And so you build a relationship with one reporter and then the reporter leaves and moves on. Yeah, that happens. So I guess I would say email would be the first point of contact if you're trying to get some coverage. The other thing that is important to do is making yourself relevant to whatever it is that's going on in the news cycle. So I'm trying to think of an example. The universities around here do a pretty good job of that. Let's say that there's a story about cybersecurity, for example. They would reach out proactively to the media and say, hey, you need a cybersecurity expert. We have that for you. And we can facilitate that interview. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question or helping you all that much. Okay. Way in the back.
Hi there. Thank you so much for sharing with us and presenting. This was truly incredible. And my biggest takeaway especially was about being authentic. Thank you. But what I would like to know is, as far as the rest of, you gave us a lot of advice. What was the best piece of advice that you ever received from somebody else?
That's excellent. Several things come to mind. I mentioned the woman who was the primary anchor of the station in Grand Rapids. I was 23 years old when I went to Grand Rapids, and that's a large television market, so I was incredibly intimidated and very green, and so I spent about the first 2 years there just soaking it all in and watching, and she taught me several things. She was very much a proponent of the authenticity and just being true and making sure that you are really staying true to who you are at all times. So that was a huge lesson, a huge takeaway. The other thing, and this applies really primarily more to broadcasting than it does to general communication, and that is preparation. So I had a habit of every script that I read on television, I had looked at no fewer than 3 times. That was kind of my own rule. And so you're looking at it the first time. So as an anchor, you're not necessarily writing every story that you're reading on the air. Sometimes it's a producer who's written it, sometimes it's a reporter who's written it. And so I would look at it the first time and put it into my voice. You know, does it make sense? Everybody has their own voice, the way they say things, the words that they might use, the phrasing. So I would edit it, rewrite it, put it in my own voice. I would close it, put it away, go on to a different story, come back to it later, and then check it for facts and grammar and spelling. So then my focus was purely on making sure that this is an accurate story, that we've answered all the important questions in the script, that it's factually correct, that the spelling and the grammar are correct. So I would do that. Put it away, look at a different script, come back to it a third time, and then I was solely looking at it as how am I going to deliver this story? And I could look at that a couple of different ways. Usually I'm sitting at my desk, read that script out loud, so that you make sure, when you read something out loud, it sounds different to you. Reading it out loud, making sure that it sounds right, but also picking up on anything that might trip me up, any phrasing that might sound awkward, and just really committing it to memory and practicing it. The other thing that is important to do is to look at the emotion that you're trying to convey in a story, because every story is different. And so part of being a good broadcaster is not putting your emotions on your sleeve necessarily, because we don't want to project our emotions onto somebody, but having the appropriate emotion, having it match the story. Does that make sense? So that you're conveying the proper emotion. You're obviously not going to have a huge smile on your face and be all bubbly if it's a tragic story. So one of the things that I used to do, this was even before I was in broadcasting, I was 16, 17 years old, and my mother would be cooking dinner, and I would sit at the kitchen table and read the newspaper out loud to her. I mean, that's how, I mean, I knew at such an early age that was what I wanted to do. And so that practice and that repetition really benefited me later. So those two things, probably the advice, the authenticity part, and then just the practice and the preparation. You can never be too prepared. Yeah.
How has your customer focus changed in your role change, in your career change?
Yeah, this has been such a wonderful experience for me. I generally, and this evolved over the years, but when I was in TV, you know, our viewers were our customers from the news point of view. Now, obviously from a sales point of view, our customers were the companies that were advertising for us, and so we kind of were beholden to two different, you know, to our viewers and to our advertisers. And so my focus was always on making sure that we gave the right information to the viewer, that we were relevant to them, that we, you know, told them the stories in a way that mattered to them. That was purely my focus. I wasn't worried about making advertisers happy or worried about, you know, what people thought necessarily. But one thing you have to understand about television news is that everyone who watches it, they're basically an expert on what you do. And they are more than happy to share their expertise with you. They are experts on your hair and your makeup and your wardrobe. And they're not afraid to share those things, especially once social media really came along. And so many years passed, and I got to the point where, you know, I was always incredibly kind to people. If they would write me a letter that was critical, I would write them back, I would respond, kind of that kill them with kindness thing. But at the end of the day, my attitude became, if you really don't like it, if you really don't like my hairstyle, if you really don't like the way I'm doing something, turn the channel. I mean, I'm not forcing you to watch, and I'm thankful that you do, but if you really don't like it, don't watch. What I have learned about Sweetwater, which I love about Sweetwater, is that every single customer, every single interaction counts. It matters. And when I say that, that's not lip service. Chuck actually cares about what every single customer thinks, and he wants every single person's experience to be the best it can be. And so I can't look at it from the point of, well, if you're not happy with it, you can buy a guitar from somewhere else, because that's not the way Sweetwater works. And I love that. And so we are much more customer-centric in that respect, much more focused on making sure that every single interaction you have with Sweetwater is perfect, or as perfect as it can be. Is that kind of what you were? Yeah. Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
It's been a pleasure listening to you
Thank
talk
you.
this morning. As a nutritionist and a coach, I think about the questions that I ask people. I want them to be open-ended, and I'm wanting to get to know them and get to the bottom of it. So what are some of your favorite open-ended questions generally?
Gosh. Yeah, and open-ended is always the way to go, especially if you're dealing with kids. Because if you ask a yes or no question to a child or a teenager, you will get a yes or no, for sure. One of the things that I always would fall back on is, how do you feel about whatever it is? You know, in your case, it would be, how do you feel about your body? How do you feel about the food that you're eating? Those kinds of things. So that's completely open-ended. And then, of course, just really listening to how it is that they're answering you. The other thing that's not even really a question, it's more of a statement, is just tell me about. tell me about the time that you, whatever. Because it just really allows them to frame their answer in whatever way they want. Yeah.
Hi, tell us about your new role with Sweetwater.
So she asked about my new role at Sweetwater. So probably about 60 or 70% of my job is helping facilitate all of the charitable giving that Sweetwater does, as well as sponsorships and support that we give to agencies. I'm not the final decision maker, and I'm very thankful for that. It's not my money that I'm giving away. So we have a committee of folks, and then ultimately Chuck make the decisions on where that money goes. But one of the great things that I get to do is really get to be involved in the community in terms of the nonprofits and the agencies, many of which I worked with before, as a broadcaster and had connections with many of those. But this is a completely different side that I get to see. I really feel like I'm doing things to help in the community, and that's wonderful. So those requests that we get for donations and sponsorships come into me. I'll vet them, take a look at our records, have we donated to them in the past, if we have, to what degree, and then send some notes on to the committee. The decision gets made, and then it comes back to me, and then I facilitate it on the back end, making sure that they get their payment, that if we are sponsoring an event, we have a table that we can fill. How do we fill that? Those kinds of things. Do we have an ad that we need to create for a program book? Then I work with our graphics designers to get that made and get that sent. So there's a lot of just little tedious kind of coordination things that happen on that end. And I spend a lot of time meeting with agencies, nonprofits, groups that need support. And I wish that we could say yes to everything, and we do say yes to a lot, but we can't say yes to everything. So that is one of the biggest parts of my job. The other part is PR, which is just basically trying to get earned media coverage. I worked with Jamie a lot when we did our groundbreaking back in October, the big warehouse that we're building. It is such an exciting time to be at Sweetwater. 4 months after I joined the team, we were having this big announcement and bringing the governor in and doing all this. So it's quite frankly very easy to do because Sweetwater is such a great company and it's growing so rapidly and giving back to the community. And so PR is very easy because we have a pretty high approval rating. People like us and they know us. The big initiative that we're working on right now that I'm spearheading is more of a national outreach. How people who live in Fort Wayne know Sweetwater, they know Chuck, they know what we do. People who are musicians know who we are and they know how great we are, but there's a really big void out there of people who don't know who we are and they don't know what we do. And I'm not just meaning in the music world, but just in our e-commerce and our technology. Everything that we do here, all of our e-commerce platform, our customer, everything that we do is internal. We don't contract any of that. So we're hiring the best developers, the best IT people, the best marketing people. And so there's other story that we want to get told nationally. And so that's our big push right now. We're really trying to find ways to capitalize on the things that we're doing locally and then turning them into more of a global. So working on that. And then also working with some agencies. We have a lot of people who are very involved in the community and some boards. And so I'm trying to get a better sense of exactly where we're helping and then where we also could plug in and help other places so that we have a broad representation on local boards and that we're helping as many people as we can, not just by giving them money, but by having our super talented employees invested in places in the community. So we're hiring at a huge rate. We were bringing on sales engineers at a rate of about 12 per 6 weeks. So we're constantly onboarding new people. And so we put them through an intensive training called Sweetwater University. And so we're really trying to integrate them into the Fort Wayne community. And so part of what I'm doing as well with the internal newsletter and those kinds of things is really just getting them involved in our community and welcoming them and plugging them into Fort Wayne. Yeah, which is cool because I think Fort Wayne is just awesome. It's a great place to be.
Can you tell us us any techniques that you've used to reduce the amount of words from like, you know? It seems, I have some adult children and like is
Every other word.
It's distracting.
That and the word literally. Because that's what my girls are like. I literally, blah, blah, blah. No, you didn't literally something. That's their other crutch. I think that just honestly takes practice and it takes a lot of self-awareness. And so one of the things that I would recommend, especially if you're getting ready to give a presentation, is to record yourself. And it's super easy to do now with cell phones and watch it back. I will tell you, no one likes to watch themselves. No one likes the sound of their own voice, ever. So don't be afraid of that. Even people who do it professionally don't like the sound of their own voice when they hear it back. So I would recommend recording yourself. The other thing to do is just ask someone you trust. And I'm hesitating. I hesitated because I was not necessarily going to tell this story, but my husband, who speaks and communicates for a living, has a crutch word. He didn't know he had a crutch word until I actually went to one of his classes and said to him later, "Do you know you do this?" And he didn't, because he, right? Right? That's his crutch word, right? And he didn't realize it. And so he wouldn't have unless I had lovingly and now he's very aware of it. So I would recommend recording yourself and then just asking somebody to be brutally honest with you. Because it really does take practice. Right?
I was thinking like you were talking about the interview questions and the atmosphere in which you craft the open-ended questions. Talk about a little bit like your mental skills that you develop. So when an interviewer pushes back on you, or you find that you lose your way in a conversation and you want to eject out, like you want to be emotional, like how do you craft that inner experience to stay in that moment and not become over emotional or offensive? How do you think about crafting that when the pressure's really on in those conversational moments to be really eloquent and to stay good?
And honestly, that does take practice. I mean, I would tell you that I'm a better interviewer now than I was 25 years ago when I first started. Part of that is just being extra prepared in whatever subject it is that you're interviewing somebody about, so that you're listening and you're taking in what they're saying, but not necessarily taking everything they're saying at face value, so that you're able to just dig a little deeper and push back when they are answering the question, and you know, for example, they may not be telling the truth, or that they may not be giving you the whole story. So, like I said, I never would go into an interview with a list of questions. I would have talking points and subjects that I knew I wanted to match. In terms of not getting emotional, that's hard. It's hard to do, especially if it's a controversial subject and it's a subject you don't agree, you don't have the same viewpoint that the person you're interviewing does. That's very difficult sometimes. Again, I think it's practice. It's, just checking yourself, thinking about how you want to approach it, playing it in your head beforehand, and thinking, how will I respond if this is how they answer the question? This is how I want to push back. And I always would go into interviews as well, telling people, this is not gotcha journalism. I'm not trying to trip you up. I'm not trying to make you look bad. In fact, my job really is to do the opposite. But my job is also to get to the bottom of whatever it is that we're talking about. And I will ask tough questions and I will push back if I feel like I'm not getting the answer, but I will do it respectfully. And have that kind of agreement up front and say, here's what we're gonna do. This is before the cameras are rolling or before the actual interview takes place, and say, kind of, here are the ground rules. Let's have this agreement up front, and we're adults and we're gonna do this. And does that help kind of answer? Yeah.
Hello. I ask this with the most humility because it's a subject near and dear to my heart. How do you manage the balancing act between authenticity and fake it till you make it with confidence?
Yeah. And that's an excellent question. And I think we all know people who who have two sides to them. You see them in a professional setting and they are one way, and it may appear to be authentic, but deep down you know it's not genuine. I personally think it's okay to admit to being vulnerable and to admit I'm not the smartest person in the room. I'm not the expert on this, but I've done my homework and I am prepared and I'm smart and I'm going to listen and I'm going to learn, and that will help that conversation where I still come across as authentic. I'm not being boastful. I'm not acting like I know everything, but I am confident in my own ability to weed through what we're talking about. Does that kind of make sense? Yeah, it's hard because you don't want to come across as being inauthentic or not be genuine, but you also have to admit that you might not know everything. It's after 9 o'clock. Oh my gosh. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Do I need to turn? No, I don't need to turn this on. Heather, thank you so much. You have inspired us, challenged us, given us some amazing tools that will really carry us through so many communication efforts and opportunities. So thank you so much. Let's give her a hand again. I wish we had more time. We could have listened to you all day. Thank you. I cannot imagine how many little girls and how many young women there are that you are inspiring. So thank you again. Really appreciate it. So to wrap up, we'd like to give thanks to Sweetwater today. This is one of the best rooms in the house. So let's give Sweetwater a hand for allowing us to be here today. We also have some IWU folks here, so if you can stand. Our chancellor is here, Matt Lucas. We have Mark Alexander, our dean, and Les Kramer and Jonelle, several of us. So there's a table when you were coming in. If you have any questions for us, we'd be more than happy to answer those for you. So to give you a few announcements, we have Allie Lane. Are you still here? Allie, can you stand just another time? This is Allie. Let's say hi, Allie. Hi, Allie. She's with the Mad Ants. First Fridays has a family night specifically for you. It's next Friday on March 8th. And Allie will be right outside this room at a table right near the cafeteria to take any ticket orders that you might have. I believe today is the last day. Is that correct? Yes. Today's the last day to sign up. So if you're available next Friday night, see Allie. It's a great night to see the Mad Ants with your friends and family. Next is the Better Business Bureau Torch Awards, and I don't know how many of you are familiar with that. You should have received a flyer when you came in on that. I feel like I'm looking at a mirror here. Look at the flyer. But anyway, their event is specifically to honor businesses, individuals, and nonprofit organizations for their integrity, for doing business the right way. And so Marjorie and Rick, thank you. They have graciously given us an offer. First Friday's attendees, a discount on the ticket for their Torch Awards event, and that is taking place April 24th over the lunch hours. So if you can come, sign up. There's a little code First Friday that you put in when you register. Also, for those of you who were familiar with Charlie Butcher, he's going to be recognized. He's the individual award winner. He's going to be recognized posthumously at this event, and it's the Torch Awards 14th annual event. It's something unique that they're doing, but his wife will be there to receive that award. Also, First Friday's women's event, June 7th, ladies, save the date. It's going to be a great time. We have wonderful speakers lined up, and we're looking forward to that. It's going to be about 3 to 3.5, 4 hours, so plan for the day starting at 7:30 in the morning. Put it on your calendar. We're going to roll out some information on that really soon. And our next First Friday is going to be April 12th. That's not the first Friday, it's going to be the second Friday in April. I know, but come to that event. We're going to have that registration open for you pretty soon. And that's all I have. Have a great weekend. Go and be authentic. Listen to someone and pray for spring. Thank you.